Well, joining us now is Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorists at the Ministry of Defence. Chip, what sort of impact will Biden's visit to the region have in this conflict?
Well, I think there's two things initially. The first one is I do think there will be some humanitarian relief, and I think that was part of the deal of him going to the country. So I do think you'll see some aid being brought in to Gaza through the Rafah crossing. The second one is there's really brinkmanship going on between the Israelis and the support of the US, and secondly between Hezbollah and Iran, and it's really keeping Iran and Hezbollah out, which is the key thing. Now, do I think that will happen? I still think in probability yardsticks, which is the way that we measure this, and in intelligence terms, an escalation of this is still in the likely or probable space, which is 55 to 75%. But as I always recall the historian of my youth, A.J.P. Taylor, nothing is inevitable until it happens. So it's not inevitable that there'll be an escalation, and there's still a lot of variables to play for within that space.
Chip, welcome to Talk today. Great to have you on, my friend. Watching pictures just then as the motorcade for President Joe Biden having landed in Israel. To be fair, when he arrived at the St Andrews Air Base last night, just literally at that moment, Jordan pulled out of those talks today after that attack on the hospital. What I'm interested in, and you were head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, what we don't know when we're reporting on this continually is what is going on behind the scenes. So we've talked all morning about how the Israelis have a right to get their hostages back, but we all also absolutely should acknowledge that this humanitarian disaster that's unfolding in front of our eyes, nobody wants that. We should look at lessons from the past. What I want to ask you from a intelligence and military point of view is this. I noticed yesterday when I heard that Biden was going, that the Israelis said, we haven't ruled out other particular or possible ways of doing it. It might not be this, it might not be that. Do you think there's a lot more diplomacy, wrong word, a lot more discussion going on behind the scenes than we all in the rest of the world are aware of?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. We know that there's patient behind-the-scenes diplomacy, and that's been a good thing. I think the Americans have been very good at that, not being sort of vociferous on the front foot and doing things behind. Now, you can see this really in the position of Qatar. So Hanaya, the head of Hamas, for example, lives in Qatar, and Qatar are often used as a sort of soft power interlocutor in these situations. And I think that is going on. They're an unusual country in that they're sort of fairly supportive, for example, of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is banned in Jordan and Egypt because of its not just because of its rhetoric, but because of its program, which includes, the overthrow of what they see as apostolic regimes in the Middle East, which would include Egypt and Jordan, and that's before you get to the exterminationism of Israel. So there is diplomacy going on, and jaw is always better than war. Whether it will lead to any de-escalation, I suspect not, because the trouble with going towards any notions of humanitarian peace. And in a way, you could say that if you go back to the town hall meeting of Trump, for example, on Ukraine, that he sort of said that he didn't think in terms of winning or losing, but as stopping the killing. Now, although that is a commendable thing, and none of us want to see people killed, it doesn't solve the macro problem, and it doesn't achieve any of the objectives which the Israeli War Cabinet have stated, which of course include the destruction of Hamas military capability and the collapse of Hamas rule in Gaza.
Chip, the MI5 Director General Ken McCallum last night suggested that conflict in Gaza could inspire terrorism over here in the UK. We obviously saw that incident in Brussels just a couple of days ago. Just how concerned should we be over here for such lone wolf attacks?
Yeah, and I think we've heard about another Brit being killed this morning in Uganda, which is pretty rare. I think we should be concerned. The last time that JTAC, Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, raised the threat level, which is currently at substantial to severe, was in November 21, which was to do with 2 attacks on the European continent. The problem I think we've got, and I think we'll see manifest, is what we might call salad bar terrorism, where you've got a pick and mix of various issues, which those who are extremists might propel them into action. So it might be the cause of Hamas, it might be the cause of Palestine, it might just be seeing pictures on TV of the attack on the hospital. We have to be very careful about that. So I would expect to see possibly more terrorism in the UK. And the first manifestation of that might be in terms of this raising of the threat level from substantial to severe.
Chip, it would be fair to say, just to sum up, and delighted that you could join us this morning, worrying times globally, in the United Kingdom, and really everywhere. And I think you know, the most important thing, I understand the Israeli point of view more than you'll understand. I'll understand the innocent Palestinians. I think terrorist organisations like Hamas need to be exterminated in their entirety. But the world will watch. This is a very difficult time, isn't it?
It is a very difficult time. I mean, you know, Churchill said apparently that you can have too much war. And to me, it looks like we're going to have too much war. And none of us like that.
No.
I didn't really think that in my lifetime I'd see another war in Europe and another potentially major war in the Middle East.
Well, Chip Chapman, thank you so much for joining us this morning.